welcome. In today's webinar, we are going to discuss the language components that support the development of literature in early childhood education. Let's start with the definitions. Here on our slide, you will see definitions of each component. We'll start with syntax. Syntax is the set of principles that dictates the sequence and function of words in a sentence in order to convey meaning. This includes grammar, sentence, variation, and the mechanics of language. Next one we're going to speak about is semantics. Semantics is the aspect of language concerned with meaning. Morphology. A morpheme is the smallest unit of meaning in the language. Phonology is a group of skills that supports the development of someone's reading skills. And the last component is pragmatics, the area of linguistics that puts meaning into context. Here we'll see examples of what each of those components consist of. So we'll start with phonology. Phonology, for example, will be when a child is using the clapping method to identify the number of syllables within a word. Knowing that a word has multiple syllables is called phonological awareness. So we'll go with the next component, which is semantics. An example of semantics would be a child being able to explain the meaning of a word or a sentence. For example, the word startled. If a child understands the meaning of the word, they'd be able to provide you with a sentence that contains the meaning of the word. The next component is syntax. An example of syntax would be when a child being able to properly create a sentence, written or orally, using the rules of the language. An example would be when a child says, I went to the store, rather than saying, to store I went. Next component would be morphology. Morphology, an example of that would be when a child can understand that the word geography has independent parts that holds its individual meaning. Geo means the earth. Child will be able to acknowledge that the word has something to do with the earth. The next component will be pragmatics. This is when a child can determine the context or the social intention of the meaning of a sentence, within a text and or the phrase in a conversation. More of like reading between the lines, or understanding that a question or a statement is rhetorical. Well, in order to be able to read physical words, we would need to understand where those words come from and how they function. Again, going to understanding the rules and the regulations of language. So, which is why it's important to understand that these components, phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics, and pragmatics, all support the development of literacy skills. Um, and we could easily base that off on a theory that is used till today, which is called the simple view of reading. It's a theory based off of an equation that states that word recognition times language comprehension equals to reading comprehension. So, in order for this equation to function, a student or even an adult who's learning English for the first time needs to have 100% word recognition and 100% language comprehension in order to be a functional and successful reader. Into the topic of working with students with exceptionalities. I'll give the example of working with a ELL student, an English language learner. This is very, very important for them. In order to have a successful ELL student, they have to understand the rules of the language that they're learning. So, for example, using English and Spanish, Spanish and English have different rules. Spanish uses gender nouns versus English that uses gender neutral nouns. And to finalize our webinar, we'll quickly go over the two research based instructional strategies that you could use across the board. The two research based instructional strategies will be an explicit and systemic teaching. Systemic instruction is when A is taught in logical order based on the rules of the context. So you keeping syntax in mind and using the definition of syntax to teach language, which will later on support with their literature development. The next strategy would be explicit instruction. Explicit instruction is a one-on-one instruction with the student. The teacher reviews all of the content areas, which also helps identify weak or missing academic skills.